about 5:15 in the evening. The sun is just starting to get to the point where it's going to set as a bird flies to that tree right in front of the camera. I believe you might be able to see it now as it flies to a tree closer to me. That's pretty cool. And now it flies away. That's a pretty cool sight. I'm a bit tired today, so we'll see how this video turns out. I spent 2 hours in the early morning trying to find one of my SD cards that fell on the floor. It fell off my desk and hit the foot pedal, the exercise foot pedal I have, and that caused it to take an unpredictable bounce. I didn't actually see it fall, which is why it was so hard to locate, but I heard it. So I was actually trying to drop other things just to get a sense for where those things would end up. And it turned out the reason that I couldn't find the SD card quickly was because it was behind one of the footings of the couch, so my view was blocked. I guess the takeaway message there is don't lose small pieces of technology because they're hard to find again. I would say overall, unfortunately, as a squirrel makes noise in the foreground, today has been a harder day in terms of it being more difficult to take deep breaths. So I feel like that's just gonna be an issue that comes and goes. That's not so great. If you look at the videos on my channel, you will see that a lot of the videos touch on applied philosophy. Applied philosophy is very useful. It's basically my go-to for understanding everything. I even use it in large part in my scientific pursuits in college. I talked about this in a previous video, but a great way, a creative way to come up with a hypothesis to test experimentally in science is to use modal logic to some extent. Basically what I would do is try to think of all possibilities and then try to examine what would have to be true for each possibility to be realized. I'm not sure if every scientist works this way, but that's the way my mind approaches science. Anyway, I have come to the determination that I want to try to challenge myself more intellectually in the videos that I make, and I think I will do this by trying to explore pure philosophy. This, I feel, is much harder than talking about applied philosophy, because pure philosophy is so much more abstract and it requires a very specific mindset. But I would really like to challenge myself more in the videos I make. So I think that would be a fun thing to try. Face. And we will continue the discussion. As I said in a previous video, when you do this, make sure that your walking sticks are never that far away from you. Because you never know what's going to happen as two squirrels come running down the hill to settle in all the wood debris. This is always a good view. Just standing here with my handhold, and from this point, a normal person, a healthy person, could just walk down, but I have to sit down and slide. You want to watch out when you make that movement, that your the leg doesn't get too trapped behind you, because that will put torque on your knee and lower leg, and you don't want that. If I could continue where I left off yesterday, where I was discussing the limitations of philosophy, the most logical connecting point is to discuss the nature of the human mind through an analogy. To me, the human mind is very much like a computer with a high storage capacity. Now, a computer with high storage capacity is very useful. Although, just because you have a lot of data doesn't mean that a good percentage of that data is useful. A lot of data is what you would call noise. A trained person is required when you want to make sense of a large amount of data and pull any meaning from that data. Scientists go to school for years, sometimes almost a decade, to learn how to do this. Now, a goal of philosophy, in my view, is to serve as that scientist combing through the data. I said yesterday that philosophy serves to catalog all the major ideas of humanity. But an additional purpose of philosophy is to not necessarily pass prescriptive judgment on those ideas, but to, in a sense, serve as some sort of filter filtering in and out ideas that are of what I would call sound grounding, as the squirrel runs through the leaves. Let me get down a little bit further so you can get a different view of the rock face. It's always good to wear heavy pants when you do things like this so that the sharp rock has less of an opportunity to hurt you. This is a nice spot right here. If philosophy is successful at performing the functions of a scientist in creating a picture of a useful trend through all the data, then I believe philosophy has served a great purpose. One of the major questions of philosophy is the overly broad question of what exists. Now, to me, this question opens itself up to answers that are wide open. If your goal is to find narrow definitions for things, to make philosophy more understandable and useful to humanity, you shouldn't ask questions where the question can produce such a wide variety of ideas. What you should do instead is ask a series of questions which then produce a wide variety of ideas. And then at least it gives you a greater sense for where people differ in their ideas. It gives you a greater distinction of the nuances of each particular question that you ask. If you were to ask me what exists, I would break it down into fictional and non-fictional realms. Of course, as the plane flies overhead, all ideas exist. Anything that can be thought of can be said to exist as at least a mental state. Now, a more specific question that can be asked is, does something that exists as a mental state carry the same weight as something that exists as a physical object in the universe? Although it could also be argued, maybe more successfully in the future, that an idea can possibly be traced back to its physical origins through neurons firing in the brain. But I don't think we are there at this point. It is interesting to think about this. If we are comfortable in saying that all ideas that have been thought of exist, then truly the only things that do not exist are ideas that have not been thought of yet. You can see where the room for growth is in this position. As time goes by and technology improves, people will have the opportunity to understand the world more fully. And as a result, the ideas they have will become more spectacular. So in a sense, what will exist in the future is different than discussing all the possible things that exist, even the things we are unaware of. It is impossible to discuss the things to which we are currently unaware. In my view, we can only discuss things that we are currently aware of. I believe that's a famous thought of a classic philosopher. I can't remember who at this particular time. But it is interesting to think of the distinction between what I would argue does currently exist, and all the things that may currently exist that we are unaware of. That is the subject, I believe, of modal logic. If you ask overly broad questions, you'll get a lot of nonsensical answers. I believe the greatest responsibility of philosophy is to ask detailed questions which limit the possibility for erroneous answers that or explanations to things that lead people away from anything that could be deemed as a reasonable opinion. People can hold unreasonable beliefs, and they can even act on those unreasonable beliefs. But that doesn't mean that those unreasonable beliefs aren't harmful to humanity. Just because one society can justify to themselves the actions they take doesn't mean, as the squirrel runs very fast through the leaves, is right in front of me. Getting back to my point. Just because one society can hold beliefs which are not well rooted and can still be justified by that society doesn't mean that those beliefs are not harmful to a large percentage of the overall global population. This is a good spot. I have a animal tree here. This is the benefit of coming out early enough so that you have the opportunity to move around and see things. One of the interesting thought experiments of philosophy is the idea as a plane flies overhead. The idea of an old ship that over time has every part replaced. Is that repaired ship the same as the old ship? This relates to how humans change throughout their life. Some people would say that we are in a constant state of change. I would argue that although this is true, the one difference between a ship and a human being is that throughout our life, our brain, the great supercomputer that it is able to maintain memories. And it is our memories of the past which give us our sense of identity. So we are more the same even through our ever-changing nature than a ship would be where every piece has been replaced. For a ship where every piece has been replaced to be the same as it was in the past, that ship is only the same, in my opinion, in name only. Maybe in a legal sense, it is the same. But I believe human permanence is more concrete than that, thanks in part to the memories that we hold. Now, there is a possible exception to this, and that exception would be people that may be suffering memory loss through various illnesses. It can be argued that as their disease progresses, they are no longer able to maintain a sense of identity. And once you lose that ability, it can be argued that you are no longer the same person. If we go back to the supercomputer analogy of the human brain that I've been using to suffer from an illness which deteriorates your memory is analogous to a computer that has a corrupted file. If a computer has a corrupted file, or part of a file is corrupted, then the contents and identity of that file are largely forever changed. I argue the same principle holds for a person. See, I like these talks because I feel like I know enough to give them, at least enough in my view, and it forces me to read more every day to try to stitch the ideas together. And you can't really just have a YouTube channel where you only talk about having a disability. You can, but your audience is going to be pretty small. And I feel like I have the intellectual ability to talk about more things and grow an audience. As the sky takes on a deeper shade of blue, and those annoying dogs bark in the foreground. This is a nice shot of moss-covered rock. Anyway, I'll make my way up now because it gets dark very fast. in a sense, coming back up this hill is a simple process, but it's also very hard. It's kind of representative of life. Seems like everything has a hard side and an easy side. But most of the time, those two sides are not equal. Really have to stick your knees in the ground and just move forward. That's really what this is about. Like that hole. An animal made that. And I don't want to be here to disturb that animal. Even though I will stick the camera right in the entrance point for a little bit. Because it's always important to get a good shot within reason. Okay, first part is done. The second part is equally as hard. It's all about awareness. There you go. That was a nice mix of good discussion and physical exertion for a short time anyway. Again, you want to try to stay physically active so you don't lose whatever ability you have. Even if you're not feeling well, you have to push forward anyway and remain physically active. This is a nicely colored sky here. It's not too dark yet. As the flock of birds make their way across the sky. Right on their schedule. One interesting topic or question of philosophy is, what is the nature of knowledge? How is knowledge obtained? Is knowledge obtained through experience alone? Or is there a deeper, more abstract grounding to knowledge? If you look at human behavior, I would say that knowledge most likely is a combination of learned behavior and some innate ability. I do not think knowledge is solely an experience-driven endeavor. I believe that you can know certain things without having to experience those things. There's an association with having a disability and feeling that not all knowledge has to be experienced for you to claim that you are knowledgeable on a subject. There are many things I will never experience as a result of my disability. That does not mean that I lack knowledge regarding the benefits or drawbacks of the things I cannot do. I am fully aware of what I am missing out on and what disabled people miss out on. And that is part of the reason why disabled people are so depressed. If the acquisition of knowledge was purely one of having a previous experience, then the frustration that disabled people feel would probably not be so great. However, as I said before, it is thanks to the awesome capabilities of the supercomputer human brain that we are able to contemplate and thus be knowledgeable about things that we do not have direct experience with. A lot of science, whether it be cosmology or astronomy, is done in such a way where we do not have the abilities to directly observe a phenomenon, but we can look at strong indicators that such a phenomenon took place and be confident that such a phenomenon actually took place. That is, in a very real way, taking an indirect path in the pursuit of knowledge. I'm going to get to my last handhold tree because it is getting pretty dark now. It is, without a doubt, more laborious to breathe than it used to be not too long ago. That is not a good sign. Standing up now. As we take some final looks at the fading orange light and on the other side the moon just barely visible through the trees. That's a nice shot though. Its hidden nature is kind of cool.